Hey y'all, I'm Reese, and welcome to Making Meaning. Making Meaning is a podcast by the Cohere Collective, here to guide you along your making meaning path in a way that makes sense for you by sharing an array of meaning-making stories. This week, I am joined by musician and singer-songwriter Macy Pearl. Macy makes music inspired by her spirituality and is motivated by spreading joy, and you can find her songs Giddy, Burn, and Call Me wherever you listen to music, and there are links in the show notes as well. I am really excited to share our conversation that was all about creativity and the creative process, vulnerability, and how vulnerability ties in with art. So let's take a deep breath and get started. Macy, thank you so much for joining me and spending a little bit of time this beautiful Monday evening. I end up recording a lot on Mondays.
Really?
And I'm always like, there's so many other things, like people probably want to just have a nice meal and go to bed early on a Monday. So thank you for being here on a Monday instead of doing that. I appreciate it.
Yes, of course. No, I mean, I love talking, and especially when I can talk about music, I'm just always jumping on that opportunity. And so this is my first podcast, so
welcome.
It's
to the
crazy because I'm like,
game.
I see a microphone, I'm like, I want him to sing in it or something.
Right.
So
certainly not your first time in front of a microphone.
Yes, but thank you so much for having me.
Yes,
I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to dive into just everything with you.
I know.
The first question that I always start with for all of my guests is just what's one thing you're grateful for right now. Can be whatever pops to your mind first. It does not have to be crazy or anything, just to kind of start off our conversation.
Okay, that's so sweet. That's such a sweet question. I would say I'm really thankful for my relationships right now. Whether it's just my family or really my friendships. I just came off of a fun little beach vacation with my friends.
I love that.
And so I just really value that quality time with them, and I am really thankful to have a supportive family, and especially my friends too, and just not just in terms of music, but just in life in general, and like kind of the different phases we all go through together, especially like these past 2 years. We're all, well, at least the people in my circle are kind of figuring out as we go.
Yeah, it's a huge time of change.
Yes, and so I wasn't expecting that, so I'm really thankful just to experience that with them. So I always try to reflect on time spent together and that support that has been shown, so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think having people that are going through that shared experience with you is so important, because it's like if you don't have someone that is fully understanding that same transition or phase of life, it can be really difficult.
It can,
Yeah.
for sure. And just in terms of music too, because I'm always trying to find someone who is in music, or just trying, not necessarily like trying to make connections or something like that, but like, just
also doing, there's nothing wrong with trying to find those connections.
Gotta get that networking.
Yes,
on.
you always do. You always do.
But yeah, it's just really important to find people who are supportive and really understand what you're doing. And I think there's a difference between supporting and understanding kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And so just, I mean, I'm sure you understand with the podcast and just wanting to get this going, and you've done a great job with that. And so
thanks.
Just in terms of, starting your own thing. And
yeah, there is a huge difference there. Not that you can't be supportive if you don't understand.
Yeah. But
it's a different kind of support when someone like really gets it and gets what you're trying to do. It's like, oh, they see me.
Yeah. And
having people like that, especially if you're trying to do something different,
right,
or creative or risky, it's important to have people that get it and are like, yes, take that risk, take that jump.
Yes.
I love that.
For sure.
Second question that I always ask everyone to kind of start with, and this one's a doozy, but it's, what is your story? You are allowed to take this any way that you interpret it. It does not have to like encompass your entire life. Obviously, the amazing 24 years that you've been alive cannot be discussed in answer to one question, but however you interpret that question, I would love to hear your story.
Okay, great. I'll give you a short answer first, and then I'll give you a long answer.
That sounds great.
So the short answer would probably be someone who really loves to be good at something. And I say that in terms of, you know, I haven't really, well, I try to be good at things in a way that's like, oh, people look at me, or, you know, it's very like people pleasing, I guess.
100%. Well, and I think perfectionism, not to put that word in your mouth at all,
for sure,
but I'm like, relatable content.
Yeah.
But perfectionism, I think, is innately tied to people pleasing in the sense that why strive to be perfect if it's not for other people a little bit? And it's based on a lot of the times other people's definition of what perfection is. So I totally hear that. And hear that, especially growing up. It's hard to break out of that. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's kind of the short answer. Yeah, sure. And then the long answer would be, you know, growing up, I just kind of prioritized academics and athletics, and I was kind of brought up in an atmosphere that didn't necessarily prioritize the arts, or I kind of got into my head that it kind of wasn't the quote-unquote like cool thing to do, I guess. Yeah. And it really was risky to kind of do things with the arts, and I always grew up writing, and I always loved doing that. I loved English class or something where I was always being creative with words. And so, you know, when I would do little theater classes or little plays in elementary school, that's when I felt like most alive, I would say. And then all that said, I did enjoy athletics for sure. And I think that had a lot to do with character development, you know, being in a competitive atmosphere and all of that. Well, and being on a team, and like there's so much to learn from that.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm grateful for that time for sure. But there has been times in my life where I'm like, oh my God, if I just would have gone back, you know, when I was 17 and just like skipped college and then just like moved out to LA or something and just did it Dua Lipa style, you know, or something, then I would have been in LA by now or something like that. But, you know, I just look back and I'm just like, you know, everything happens for a reason. I'm a huge believer in that. And so I just take everything with like a grain of salt now. And so, yeah, my story is super unconventional when it comes to music and growing up in that, because I would always come home, you know, from a long day at school or something and just always be surrounded by music. My family's pretty musical. We all sing, except my mom. She's a wonderful woman, but she does not sing. That's okay, yeah. So all my sisters, we kind of grew up singing, and I just loved High School Musical or anything where I could be creative with that. And then that was kind of my happy secret place, I would say. And then my kind of junior, senior year of high school, I started taking, you know, piano and guitar lessons, and that was really when I was kind of most happy. And I just couldn't shake leaving behind all the academic work that I've done previously. And I started off as like a nursing major. Wow. And so, which is so crazy, but I was literally only nursing for a little bit, but I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do, but I was still like in my head in terms of doing music, and I considered, you know, doing a music major or something like that, but I'm glad I didn't, because I truly think that I would have gotten burned out. And honestly, I think I would have failed, because it's very heavily involved with music theory, and I didn't know any of that coming into it. So I'm just really glad that I didn't do that at that time, but I was still very involved with, you know, kind of things on the side that had to do with music. So they had this thing called Spring Sing at my college, and I kind of spearheaded that with writing the script and then rewriting all the songs and then leading a group of girls. And that was really developmental towards my career in music, just because that was when I was like, this is very fun. This is what I feel energized doing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I had multiple other jobs too that kind of emphasized a political science role, kind of thing. And then I majored in politics, philosophy, and economics.
Wow.
And I usually just say political science because it's like less of a mouthful.
Sure.
But I kind of did that because I would say political science is an environment where it's really achievable to kind of move up, I would say.
Yeah.
And so there's different like roles you can do, and you know there's
so
room to grow.
Applicable, I feel like, in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And so that was kind of the reason why I did it. And yeah, again, I'm grateful for that time, but honestly it wasn't until like COVID, and when we were all locked away with our phones and basically had everything stripped away from us, and that's when I really started entertaining the thought of pursuing music, because we all had to take a step back from our job and kind of just ask ourselves hard questions, you know, like, is this what I should be doing?
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, the world is ending kind of thing.
Yeah.
And just that perspective was very jarring. And so I kind of had a 180 during COVID and lockdown. And so, yeah, I remember, Lynn Stella is like one of my favorite artists, and she released her album, I think it's called like 1, 2, 3. But I would just play that album just over and over. And I remember I was just playing this one song and like kind of analyzing it and talking about it and playing it with my guitar and everything. And my parents have always been generally very supportive.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful for that. And I was talking to my dad about it, and he was just kind of like sitting there and with his hands crossed, or with his arms crossed, and like kind of smiling. He was just like, all right, you need to do music. Like, he's like, you know, I've always said that I will be proud of you no matter what. But he was like, I've never seen you like you were talented. You need to do this. You need to take steps towards music. Like, what's
holding you back? Right,
exactly. What's holding you back? What is a better time than this, kind of thing. Wow. And so that was when I was like, okay, I can do that. And so I just started kind of taking steps towards pursuing it, and everything kind of fell into place, and like all the doors kind of opened towards that position to kind of do that. And so yeah, no, in sum, I would say I'm a person who loves music and is just trying to make her dream happen. So
what a beautiful sentiment, because it's like there's a reason why music is like the most popular pastime, the most popular form of entertainment, something that almost everyone can relate about, right? Like, I think I've met like one person in my entire life who's like, I'm not a music person, you know? But even then, everyone's like, are you okay? Like, why are you not a music person?
Right.
So absolutely, I think that there's something so innately powerful about that art form and about that medium, and feeling called to kind of merge together all of these different ways that you've been creative in these different mediums. Like you said, in high school, being creative through words was something that you really loved, and getting to pair that with this other talent that you have of vocalization, and then also this other talent of making actual music, right? It's like, it's such a marriage of different skill sets that you are extremely talented in, which is really beautiful to see. A couple things that I want to kind of dive a little deeper into.
For sure.
you said that music was your secret happy place for a long time, that was, it's kind of difficult, and especially in middle school and high school. It's hard to be in middle school and high school. But I'm like, as a nerdy theater kid, I can attest being a nerdy theater kid. You are the nerd. Yeah. And luckily you find your people, but it can be hard to do something different than that whole path, right? So what was that motivating factor between taking music from being your secret happy place to now wanting it to be this very public happy place for you?
Yeah.
And has that changed your relationship to music as a happy place at all?
Yeah. No, that's a really great question. So it took me a very, very long time to come to terms with my calling with music, I would say. I always knew that it's something that I wanted to do, but the thing that held me back was just the fear of failing. And I've always been a high achiever. I've set very high standards for myself, and if I do not meet them, then I'm extremely hard on myself.
Yeah.
So growing up in that environment kind of was like, okay, if I don't do what everybody else does, am I failing? And if I go on a different route and I fail, then I'm definitely failing.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of this interesting mentality. And it wasn't until I kind of set that aside, honestly, at the end of my college years, and just being like, oh my gosh, stop being so scared.
Yeah.
You can't be scared. Like, you will fail in life. You've experienced failure at this point, now that you're a junior and senior and other things. You learn from it. You make mistakes. You have to forgive yourself and then deconstruct this belief system of perfectionism.
Yeah.
And just really, honestly, forgive yourself too, and allow yourself room to be fully creative and embrace your calling. And so, in terms of it being my secret place, the people in my circle knew that it was. And I'm very thankful for that, because it's very cool to see how their role, when I was a little kid growing up around music and just loving music, to now seeing me pursue it so publicly, they have this new, I don't want to, just appreciation, or they want to celebrate me because they've seen it be secret for so long.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my gosh, Macy, we love that you're creating all these songs and you're actually making it public and you're not like scared. Because I used to have really bad stage fright.
Interesting.
Horrible stage fright. And so that was also something to work through as well.
Yeah.
Because
being a performer, yeah.
Yeah, and just, I mean, I used to not be able to sing at Christmas, like, in front of my family.
Sure.
And then, you know how your grandparents were like, get there and sing a Christmas carol, or, you know, whatever.
By the piano. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would never be able to do that. So, that was in my head, too. Like, if you can't perform in front of your family, then you can't do all these things. You can't sing in front of other people.
You're never going to be able to do this.
Correct, yeah.
Wow.
And so, yeah, fear of failure was a big thing. And then also entering music in that space is definitely something that is just very undefined, I would say. And I loved structure. So you talk, like, when you see someone, you know, performing or writing songs or something, sometimes their story is like overnight sensation, or they've been doing it for 10 years and then they're finally where they are. I kind of disassociated those two of like hard work. Like, I didn't understand how I could put work ethic and hard work into something that's creative, because I disassociated those two, because I'm like, creativity or creative people are just kind of just, you know, peace signs and love,
right?
And just they're not CEOs, I guess. And I had a hard time kind of marrying those two. And then, honestly, music being so public has been something that's been pretty hard for me.
Wow, yeah.
And basically, my songs are kind of, in a way, my diary. In a way, I wouldn't say it's like as exclusive as like Taylor Swift or something.
Sure.
No hate on her, she's amazing. But
no, right.
I'm saying I definitely take things and then I kind of elaborate them or elaborate off of like a song or something or like a circumstance.
Absolutely. Like you have this one moment of inspiration and then you can kind of create something bigger and more magical out of it, right?
Yes, for sure.
I think trying to find a way to still have privacy in this creative field is a really important balance that has to be hard to strike, and that, like you said, it's been difficult, and I'm sure you're still trying to find exactly what combination of those things works for you, and it'll probably change as you change as an artist.
Well, and even for someone in the arts, if they want to become an actress, then they can audition for a role and not really tell anybody.
Yeah.
And if they make it, then they can tell everybody. But if they don't land the role, then they don't have to tell anybody, you know?
Yeah.
But then with music, it's like, hey, here's my song, go listen to it. Like, and everyone can see the streaming numbers or something, you know?
Yeah,
and so it's very public, and that was something that I had to learn and experience. And I don't think I really realized that at the beginning, which I'm kind of glad, because I probably wouldn't have stepped into this role.
Yeah.
But I've really learned that there is beauty in vulnerability. And that is something that I've always just appreciated in the artists I've listened to growing up. And so, honestly, that's just kind of been my main motive and meaning in life, is just I just want to be able to put something into words that someone can resonate with, and just to fall back on, and to put their thoughts, feelings, and emotions into something that's fun to sing along to. And so that's a very simplistic way of putting it. But
no, but sacred simplicity, right? Like that there is a reason why like didactic little truths are repeated so often, is because they do ring true with so many people. And I think that's really beautiful. And like you said, I totally agree in the beauty and strength of vulnerability, but also needing to be smart and measured with how and when you use it, right? Because there's a difference between vulnerability and oversharing. And there's a difference between vulnerability and a cry for help, right? Like all of these things are really nuanced though, and it's difficult. And I think when you're first, at least for me, and having a very personal podcast, right? It's like, how much of my own story do I want to put out there, and how much of that is going to be helpful, and how much of that is not necessary to the mission that I'm trying to further, right? So I absolutely hear that kind of balance, and having a secret place become a public place, I think, is a really interesting balance to hear too, but I think a really cool one. And like you were saying, this thing where you have, there's no way that a creative person can also be like this analytical kind of person, but obviously you are both of those people, right? So it's like, how do I marry these two parts of my own self to be a successful artist as well? Yeah. Sorry, now I'm kind of rambling because you've given me so many things to think about. Something else that I wanted to return to, when you were just talking about this becoming a public place and kind of figuring out how to work with that, you mentioned, of course, a fear of failing being a big thing that was kind of holding you back for a little bit, but also the need to forgive yourself. Can you talk a little bit more about what that self-forgiveness piece looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So, personally, in my walk, I would say every single thing that I have done in my life has something else to look forward to. So there's another step. So I would graduate a grade and then I would go to the next grade, or I would write a paper and then get a grade on that, or I would get a promotion in my job. It's all very attainable things. And so in terms of kind of building a resume or like building a career and then going and doing this music thing that's very independent and it's a different route and something that I have kind of done, because when I would tell people, post-grad, I was like, I'm gonna do music, people would be like, what?
Yeah. Well, there's no defined path for it. It's
right.
not like you can get the internship, then get the job, then climb the company, then switch the company, and then you're CEO. Or
exactly.
Like, that's not how that works.
Yes. And so I was really struggling with being like, oh my gosh, I've worked so hard these past, 16 years building this resume kind of thing. And then now I was kind of struggling with the thoughts of like, I'm kind of quote unquote throwing it away.
Right. Am I just letting all of that go?
Right. And so that was a mentality that I really held on to. But then I was like, okay, I either look back on my life with regret in terms of never pursuing music, because I know it's something that I've always wanted to do, or I can pursue this field and this degree that I'm not passionate about and that I've done just because it was easy for me to excel in, and then do all this work in a field that I'm not really happy in. So it's like I could give it a shot and then see what happens, or I can just continue on this path that probably won't make me happy. And so,
and the degree will always be there, right? It's not like no one's coming to take away your degree. It'll be there. A job, obviously, you can't just snap your fingers and get a job, right? But there is always something you can pursue. There's always something there to do. So,
yeah,
absolutely, I hear that.
Yeah. So I really had to forgive myself of the things that I kind of viewed as failures, which in terms those are just kind of personal standards that I made for myself.
Yeah.
Which I think failure is kind of relative to everyone.
100%.
And so I kind of felt like I was failing kind of everything that I had like worked towards, I guess.
Yeah.
And however, that has proved itself to be so wrong these past couple of years, because
everything teaches you something. Everything comes to fruition in a way you could never imagine, right?
I learned things in my jobs that I experienced pursuing political science that I would have never learned now, or that were so influential in my character and my character development. And so I have a lot of gratitude towards that. Yeah. So I think I had to forgive myself in terms of that, and then just kind of set aside the two paths that I could take.
Yeah. And I think, again, don't want to put words in your mouth, but in my own like self-forgiveness journey I absolutely relate to your discussion of being a perfectionist and setting all of these sometimes unreasonable or unattainable bars for yourself to hit. For what reason? It's been about, forgiving, yes, where I failed, but also forgiving the self who set that expectation. Yes. Right? It's like, I was that way for a reason, and it protected me for a really long time, and there was a reason why I felt the need to reach all of these bars and set those really high expectations. Absolutely. But I can forgive that version of Reese now and say, okay, but you're safe. Yeah. And you can fail and take risks, and that can also be part of the journey. And a really interesting thing that I'm resonating with in your story as well is how you're kind of talking about these two paths, and it's like, okay, I have these two paths I can take. But recently, I've been doing a lot of discovering, instead of like the separation and the distance between these two paths, like the way they actually can merge and find each other again, right? And it's like, well, maybe there was a reason I was drawn to this other thing, and it actually has a tie back over here. And while it felt like two paths, it's actually like one giant maze through a wood or something to cloud this metaphor, I guess. But
no, yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, that could be a great song.
Yeah. I love it. I love that.
Good. It really could.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, to just talk about your creative process, because I'm absolutely a music person. I love listening to music. I find inspiration in that all the time. And some of the most, brilliant pieces of art in this world is music. So you mentioned a little bit your music and your songs being like a diary, but of course finding balance with that. Yeah, I would love to hear how you approach being a creative artist with songwriting. And I would have to imagine that there's something spiritual about that as well, even if...
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm like, if you're not a spiritual person, I don't want to assume that. But,
no, I am.
Okay,
Yeah.
For some reason, I had that memory, and I was like, I think Macy is, but I wanted to make sure. So
course.
I would love to hear about your creative process, but also what that means for you spiritually, and like those two kinds of sides of your music.
Yeah. So I think the most beautiful thing about songwriting is it really does happen differently every time. So I can come up with, an idea, and then it could kind of spin off of that, or I can start with a melody and then I can fill in words with that. And I think that each good song is a good song because the lyrics and the melody meet so well together. So I don't know, I just think of like Taylor Swift's Blank Space. Like the melody goes so well together with the lyrics.
Right.
And so does her My Tears Ricochet. The melody goes so well with the lyrics. And so there are different pathways to come to that conclusion and to make a good song in terms of coming up with the melody first or coming up with the lyrics first.
Sure.
I think I've kind of looked back on kind of all the songs that I have written, and it's been the majority of the time where it started off with an idea. And then whether it's just like, hey, I want to write about this. Or I want to talk about like this one word. I want the song to be this word. And kind of going off of that in the studio, and then starting with something on the pad or just something synthy and kind of cool to go along with that. I sound so like artisty. Like,
no, I love it though. I love it. You are an artist. You should sound artisty.
But yeah, and then you can really incorporate lyrics with that. And so definitely like idea, production, lyric or melody, and then lyrics. And so that's kind of like the formula that I have kind of created for myself. I'm not necessarily married to it, but I definitely kind of choose that route most of the time.
Yeah.
And then I've also learned that there is beauty in 3 people. So you can have 2 other people in the studio, including yourself, and then one is really good at melodies, and then the other is really good at lyrics, and then the other is really good at production. And then each studio time can kind of vary. One, you're better at production, and like, oh, do a little boo-doo-doo or something. And then they're like, oh, great idea. And then what if you said read instead of said? And you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, it just kind of varies. Yeah. And also that feeling is so amazing when you finally get there.
And when all of these artists can meet and kind of come in sync with one another, where all of your talents kind of merge to this, you get that beautiful, like, kind of, like, that's the like, stuff.
All the creatives together, high-fiving.
Yes.
And I have this huge, long note on my phone.
Sure.
That's just filled with music and different kind of ideas that I would want to create and kind of develop with someone. And I definitely think it's very spiritually driven in the terms of what I want to write about or an idea that's given to me. Actually, all my songs, they come straight from the Lord. I'm just like,
wow.
Okay, like, Lord, like, what do you want me to write about, kind of thing. And then it slowly becomes a song. And I try not to like compare myself to artists, because sometimes they're like, oh, I wrote this song in like 2 minutes, or something, and I'm like, oh, cool, it took me 2 weeks or something. Yeah. But it's different, and it's different every time, which I really think is interesting. And so
and I'm like you said, every song has a different process. I'm sure every artist has a different process. And I think, even though I'm not a musician, but as someone who creates things, comparison can rob you of a lot of that joy really quickly. So I think that's smart that you don't compare yourself, because as soon as you go down that rabbit hole, it, for me, short circuits all of my like creative juices that are flowing. But also, why would you ever want to be like someone else? There's a reason why you are being called to make your music. It's because no one else is doing it. Right? There's a space that only you can fill. And that is worthwhile and worth pursuing. And I'm saying this as well to like, it's a reminder for myself too, and for the listener, I suppose. But it's like, if you have a calling for something, like, everyone has a story to tell and something that they are offering to our universe, our world.
For sure.
And I think that, at least in my opinion, it is your duty to at least offer that for whatever it's worth. And that may make an impact on 2 people. It may make an impact on 2 billion people. And that's actually a good segue into my next question. So I love that it's spiritually founded for you, but your songs aren't innately religious in any sense. They're also just, really fun and catchy that I like singing along to, but also like sweet and joyful, but also emotional, but they don't necessarily touch directly on faith. Of course, all experiences tie back to spirituality, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
So kind of tying back to my original call with music, I think I was trying to become a different Macy, or kind of fit into this mold that I had made for myself versus what God had made me to be. And so I knew that that's what I wanted to do. It just took me a really long time to actually step into it and just fully trust in this is what I'm supposed to do.
Wow, yeah.
And I grew up in a Christian environment.
Sure.
But I didn't really understand what it meant to follow God until I really started to understand God's character. And then once I realized that and I was able to trust Him, I was able to kind of trust Him with that area of my life, because I was basically kind of giving everything to someone that I didn't know. And I was like, how can you trust someone that you don't really know?
No wonder self-doubt creeps in, right?
Exactly.
No wonder that fear creeps in.
Yeah, and all my confidence has come from that. And so I find myself trying to have my own confidence, and it just doesn't work, and I lose that passion that I had, and I find myself filled with self-doubt, and just completely self-destructing.
Yeah.
And so
just trusting what comes through then.
Yes.
And letting that guide you.
Yes, absolutely. And so really, that's interesting that, like you said, all of my songs aren't really geared towards Christianity or anything like that. And a lot of people have been like, oh, are you going to do Christian, music? And I'm like, oh, like, probably not. But, yeah. But I do want to say that the music industry is home to many people that sing about really, really sad things. And I say that in terms of there's nothing wrong with that, for sure. I listen to sad music all the time. Like, if I want to cry, I turn on sad music. Oh, yeah. I think it's very great and therapeutic. But there is so much light that needs to be shown. And I was like, if I can write a song that is happy, or if I can even write a sad song, but then kind of allude to that there's light at the end of the tunnel, like,
yeah,
And if I can point to something higher and greater than me, then it's like, that's so much more than I could ever do at the White House or something.
Yeah.
So,
sure. Well, and I think with that, it's like you don't necessarily have to be so explicit with offering a good message, right? And yes, I do think like speaking truth to pain and hurt, and like there's absolutely a space for that, but you also give power to things when you talk about them. And so I think trying to balance those scales is a really noble thing to do, in that you're trying to give power to lightness.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like I keep asking these kind of leading questions, but
no, I love it. Yeah. And I think for definitely these past 2 years, because this past 2 years, for everyone who's listening, I've been really pursuing music full time.
Yeah.
And so I think that I have kind of found myself in a spot being like, oh, I'm not passionate about it anymore. Or like someone told me, like, if you don't question your role in music every day, then like you're not doing it right, kind of thing.
Oh, interesting.
Which is very applicable to my circumstance, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Is this like what I'm doing? 'Cause it's so hard and it's such a slow burn, like blah blah blah. And I was extremely humbled at the very beginning, because I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know if I was going to become like an overnight sensation or something, but I've been extremely humbled, and I've learned so much about myself these past 2 years because of just the slow timeline.
Yeah.
And just with anything, like starting your own business or getting things going or like building a brand for yourself, it takes time.
Yeah.
And that's something that I also had to forgive myself with, because I put these expectations and standards on myself that I would be at Electric Studios by now. And so I just really had to forgive myself in that and just really trust in
The process.
God's plan for me and the process. And I definitely listen to music differently than I used to, knowing like this side of things. So once I started really understanding production, I would listen to music and I wouldn't have this kind of whimsical outlook on it anymore. It would be kind of more technical. And so I would kind of like lose the passion. So I would really just be like, okay, like I need that passion again, or like give me the strength to be able to wake up the next day and like write a song or something. So honestly, like it really does not come from me. It comes from the Lord. And so I'm really thankful for that, because I would not be where I am here, and I'm just a little girl trying to make it happen.
Yeah, which I love. And also I think that, you know, like one of my favorite artists or bands, I suppose, is Surfaces, who they're both extremely open about their faith, but their music doesn't, at least Surfaces music, their individual music is, but Surfaces does not have blatantly religious lyrics, but it celebrates joy and happiness and togetherness and belonging. And so I think you pursuing that is really noble and will resonate with a lot of people. But I also appreciate your perspective that it's like, even though you're pursuing something that I think is so often glamorized, it's not like, process isn't always glamorous, but that doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile or rewarding. And I think that that's really powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
To round out our conversation, because we are kind of at time.
Yes.
I have 2 more questions to just put a nice little bow on everything we've talked about. But one, is there anything we've missed, anything in light of what we've talked about that you want to make sure that you throw out there? I will certainly have all of your Spotify and Apple Music links so everyone can go find all of your lovely music and follow you on Instagram and across everything, so they can hear the wonderful work that you do. But besides all of that wonderful stuff, is there anything else that you want to throw out there?
Yeah. I would say if you are wanting to start a new business, or if you're wanting to become a musician, or you want to do the recording artist full-time thing, I would say just do it. And I know that seems so simple, but if you have the understanding that good things take time, and you are patient with the outcome. And this is a very interesting field because you really want to separate people's opinions from what makes you happy and what music makes you happy in a field where your success is determined off people's opinions.
Yeah.
Because people come up to me and be like, I didn't really like that song. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I've had people come up to me like, I love that song. So it's like, wait, it's the same song, but you don't like it and you do?
Right.
Well, there's always going to be that. So when you have that understanding and you have that in your heart, but you're making music that makes you happy and what feels right, then the world's your oyster. And so
the right people will find you.
Yes. And so I would say just do it. And I used to be very like a stickler to my own timeline. And this own timeline that I'm in, like, I have to release a single every 3 months so people don't get bored or blah 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 blah. But sometimes just like life happens.
Yeah.
And you gotta take shifts. And I haven't released anything since October, but I have a next song coming out next month.
That is exciting.
Yes. And so
do we have a title yet?
Yes, it's called Drive.
Oh my gosh, I saw on Instagram your photo shoot for it.
Yeah.
So exciting.
Yeah, so I was able to get this kind of cool vintage car.
So cool.
And basically the song is just kind of takes you on a journey of denial and then kind of acknowledging something. Okay, like, nothing, you know, I am kind of struggling with this, or, you know, maybe there is something that I can't really get over, or, you know, whatever. And then it's like, okay, I do have a problem. And then the end is like kind of forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
And just being like, okay, denial, acknowledgement, what can I do to move on, kind of thing. And so I really love the song because I wrote it back in 2021. And it's been like 3 different songs at this point, because it was kind of like an R&B song at one point, and then it was like this Katy Perry pop song, and I was like, okay, this is getting way out of hand. But it finally landed in a good place, and like my producer and I feel really good about it.
That's
and so
awesome.
I'm really excited for people to hear it. It's like the perfect song to have your windows down and
I love it.
Drive around town. And so that comes out July 28th.
July 28th. Wonderful.
And then I got some things working for the Christmas season.
Exciting.
So, yeah, it's kind of crazy right now. But, I would say it's really interesting because I've had these different jobs that I've really had to people please and to gain their opinion and to kind of win them over. But I've really struggled with having the position of being my own boss, because kind of the best achievement that you can get in this role is people listening to your music. In, you know, when you find a good song, you listen to it for a weekend or 2, and then you're like, okay, when's the next song coming out? Which I don't mean to undermine the importance of people listening to music, because I absolutely love it when people tell me that they listen to my music. That is the biggest satisfaction that I could get out of doing that. But it's kind of like, okay, I gotta start the creative process all over again. Like, I have to channel my energy after a long day of work and like do it all over again, and then like push it out for someone that like might not like it. So just find a good creative process that's good for you. Stick to it. It's gonna be like a really slow burn, but I have a long way to go for sure, but I just keep doing it and keep pressing on.
I love that. That's wonderful. Last question to just be a button on the end. What is one word that describes how you feel right now?
I'd say encouraged.
I love that.
Yeah. I think that it's really, really easy to become discouraged. And I say that because the music industry is very small, so it's really hard to get into it. And to find people that you connect with and that you work with well. And then sometimes they're on a different schedule than you, and then sometimes, you know, you find yourself in a situation where you're like, okay, now it's time where I have to kind of like learn how to write independently, or I have to work with other people that I've never worked with before. And I say all that in terms of like, I haven't had a bad experience with that, but it's just being your own boss and holding yourself accountable to maybe being independently creative. It can be challenging. And so, and especially with no one there having a play-by-play.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh my gosh, am I doing this right? I'm scared kind of thing.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't know until it's done. Yeah.
And then when someone says just keep going, keep doing it, it's so energizing. And the best thing that a person could do is just listen to a song. And so, and then also, if they tell me that they like it, that's also very encouraging. Right. So you can throw that in there if you want. But
well, that is
I feel very encouraged. And anytime that I get the chance to talk about music, I always do.
I'm so glad you are here for making meaning and Cohere. I think that art is such an important part of making meaning in our lives, and relying on artists to help us find and create more meaning as well is so important. So thank you for sharing your message, your process, a little bit of your heart here today. And of course, I appreciate you. Thank you for being here, Macy.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's been so much fun.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for being here today, and a huge thank you to Macy as well. I would absolutely love for you to be a part of this conversation, so please share your thoughts on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or LinkedIn, all at the Cohere Collective. If you want more of Macy, you can follow her on Instagram at It's Macy Pearl, and again, find her music wherever you like to listen. If you want to hear my in-depth thoughts about today's episode, subscribe to the newsletter on thecoherecollective.com to catch the blog post coming out this Friday. Please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and if you feel so inclined, leave an honest review or rating. This helps me reach the people who will resonate with my content and hopefully reach my goal of making the world a better place. Sharing the pod is also a great way to start conversations with important people in your life. Thank you to Podington Bear for making Meaning's theme music, and Nicole Ostreicher for making Meaning's art and podcast cover. You can find Nicole's work on Instagram at Nicole O Creates or at Nicole O Design. Right now, I am feeling motivated, I think is the word that's coming to mind. I've been in between several vacations and small trips, and schedules have been kind of crazy, but it's been a really good moment of reflection for me and revisiting my goals and the things that I want to pursue and the things that feel right to be pursuing this time. Thank you all so much for being here, and I hope you feel like you are living more coherently. I'll catch y'all next time. Love.